Okay, we're going to move to 5E, and this is a discussion of the district's organization from board level down and consideration of hiring an accountant. And this was brought to us by board member Peterson. And John, did you have anything you wanted to do to kick this off?
No, just that Director Peterson had requested that it be agended and we have, so it's a verbal discussion.
So Debbie, why don't you run over it here?
Yeah, I have some paperwork, and my point in bringing all of this to you is that I wanted to give you some justification for why I'd like to do those reviews. And a lot of what I've got here, I think I've got enough for you there, but I can put some over here for the public too. Yeah. A lot of what you see here is already, in fact, almost all of what you see here is old news. I don't think there's anything that people haven't seen or heard in one report or another. The only thing I did was compile it a little bit differently, and so the one of my
Do you have an extra copy?
oh sorry, yeah, but oops, sorry. Could you want
Would you like to show us the original last name?
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah, you
Or
can.
the copies or the all?
No, they're all the same. Yeah,
I'll just call the one information.
So one of the concerns that I had is that I had trouble following it, and a lot of the information I had was that there was difficulty following things over multiple years. So I also had some trouble getting the audited accounts. I did finally just go to the county to get the audited accounts. And what I did here, so that you know that the numbers should be reasonably good, is that I took their PDF files and I have a PDF converter that converted them to an Excel file. So numbers should be good. But I still am going to put in the disclaimer that this is unaudited and I'm not a CPA. So what I did, and there's a lot of information here, but I'll explain a little bit. Where you see the red print, those are the things that, to me, as having been a former factory owner with 80 employees and $6 million turnover in the 90s, these would be things as a factory owner and later as a management consultant and then as a mayor and board member on a lot of different boards. These would be things that jumped out at me when I first started on the board. And I have spent probably over 100 hours anyway looking at all of this. So the first thing I wanted to show you was total revenues, because one of my biggest concerns is the ratio of revenue to expenses. So what you want to look at is the black numbers here. It's the black numbers under the year, and I'll explain what the other things are as we go through. So just want to let you know that's where the revenues are, and that's at line 7. Then if you go down to line 12, well, no, don't go to line 12. Well, yeah, you can go to line 12. So I looked at things that jumped out because they've really radically changed. And the way I analyzed them, I did it 2 ways. The first way was, if you see the pink lines, or the pink highlights, that is the change from the previous year. In some cases, I did percentages, because sometimes you want to look at the change, sometimes you want to see the percentage. It'll give you different perspective on it. So in these, in 2006, way over at the far right-hand side on line 12, our retirement fund was $45,000, or almost 46. By 2011, it was 161. So it almost quadrupled. And there may be a good reason for that, but when I see something like that, I get a little worried. The next line was depreciation that I had some concerns about. That's number 17. And in 2006, we were claiming $500,000 a year in depreciation. By 2011, that had more than doubled. So that would tell me that we must have put in an awful lot of plant and equipment. Now, Mr. Wallace just told us that there was $5 million put in, so that might account for that. And I'm not being a CPA. I don't know. It's just something I look at. The next line, 21, office and supplies, that jumped a little bit all over the place, so that was just my query on that one. In 2006, it was $36,000, and after that, it remained fairly stable between 10 and 11, except for in 2008, it was high then also. And then membership, number 24, membership and license fees, went from just over $41,500 to $126,000. So that almost tripled. in 5 years. The next one is legal and accounting, and those are really high fees. When I looked at other sanitation districts throughout the state, some of them were $1,000 a year, some of them were $5, some of them were, I think, up to $12, but even the lowest at $35 is pretty high here. But we'll if we take that as our baseline, we still come up, over the last 6 years of accounts here, we still come up with probably about $420,000 in excess of a baseline of $35,000 over that time frame. The next one is plant chemicals and lab analysis, and that fluctuates wildly also. It was $389 in 2006, and then we had it almost double that in 2010. It's come down a little bit in 2011, but it fluctuated a lot, and I would like to ask some questions about that. Soils handling more than doubled.
Solids.
Solids, excuse me, I need my glasses. Solids handling more than doubled, that's number 27. Number 28, small tools. This is one that really confuses me. Small tools in 2000, sorry, I'm skipping?
No, you're skewed.
I'm skewed, thank you. I need my assistant, my legal assistant. In 2006, our small tools were 10,000, and they go as high as, it looks like 29 something, 36 is the highest. And I don't know how much a screwdriver costs. I don't buy screwdrivers, but I'm thinking a screwdriver and a bolt, which is what I've been told these could be. Let's say each one's $10. Well, at 36,000, you've got 3,600 bolts and screwdrivers, which is about 10 a day. So somehow this doesn't hang together for me at all. And the final thing you get to after that then is the total operating expenses. And this is the thing that causes me to go through and analyze all the rest of it, because somehow, somewhere, this has to change. We've got, in 2006, we're showing a loss of $990,000. And pretty much year on year, we're fluctuating between a operating loss of $900 to $1 million, and that's over 6 years of accounts. And what troubles me, obviously, when I'm looking at this, I look at these percentages, and that's where these percentages are really relevant to me, because we're running somewhere between 176, well, about 120 to 180% ratio of expenses to income. That's operating expenses to income. So in lots of cases, our expenses are almost double what our revenues are. Moving all the way down to line 38 now, changes in net assets. If you look to the far right, that's the 5-year total. So basically over 5 years, we've lost, and that's after we've had some other incomes, non-operating incomes. We've lost over $3 million. And if we go to the net assets at the end, it looks as though we started with almost 21 million in assets, and we're now down to 17 million. So that's showing about 4 million there. So, and then finally, I wanted to try to pull out what were our consultant fees. And I wasn't really able to do it very well. There was 1 year where it had been reported by an auditor. That was in 2009. So the 2009 figure should be correct. I believe there was a figure for 2011 as well. I just saw that, so I didn't get that one in there. So I arrived at most of those figures by putting together the legal fees and there was another special services fees. And they're running pretty high. So if we move then to the next page, it's the other spreadsheet here. Again, when we're looking at assets, in 2007, we had cash and cash equivalents of over $7 million. And now in 2012, we have $3 million, I'm told, last time I asked. So there's our $4 million gone again. Same number comes down at the total current assets line. And then depreciation again bumps up. So we must have got a lot of good new equipment there to have it bump up that much. And total assets again, similar to the page before. And the total liabilities line also gives me cause for concern, because our liabilities in 2007 were $238,000, and now they're 5 times that. just under 5 times that in 2011. And we haven't seen 2012, but no doubt it'll be out before too long. And the other thing I was uncertain about, and I just couldn't find any answers for this in anything I had looked at, was that we have our net assets, under net assets, we have restricted for capital expansion. So it looks like somewhere there's a fund of 6.7 million, and then the unrestricted of 2.6 million. So that adds up to about 10 million, 9 to 10 million. And I don't quite know where that all is, because all I can see in the bank, I understood, was 3 million. So there's probably an answer. I couldn't find it. What I did was, as I was going through the various reports, I made a list of the things that caused me concern, that jumped out. And this is not conclusive. If you have an engineer look at it, they're going to come up with a different list. If you have a chemist look at it, they're going to come up with a different list. But this is my list. And it's encapsulated in high costs, low accountability, and best practice not implemented or followed. And that's what we're seeing in all of these reports. And every one of these items was pulled from a report, and I tried not to pull the things that had already been addressed, because I know a number of things have been addressed. So we don't need to go through each one, because we've covered some of them. One of the biggest problems is that there's a public perception of conflict of interest. And that's still, I believe, out there. And I've also, it's been alleged that there's a culture of secrecy, that there's resistance to suggestions and a defensive response to regulatory bodies. And I have to say, it was like pulling teeth for me to get the budgets. And the accounts, I finally ended up going to the auditor to get them, the county auditor. So I feel there's still a real resistance to being open. And I think that's a concern to me.
By the accounts, do you mean the audits?
The audit accounts, I got them from the county, yeah, I wasn't able to get them. The other thing that I noted is, it seems like every single time we have a board meeting, there are about 3 things ranging from $2,500 to $10,000 that need to be repaired or replaced. And so we're talking about 4 to 6 a month, and they run, say they run at average 5,000. We've got a whole lot of stuff all the time going on that always needs to be repaired and replaced, and it seems like an awful lot to me. The other one was the peer review mentioned that the peer review found a way to save $500 a day on chlorine use. And that's wonderful, but what worries me is how long did we not save that $500 a day? If we did it for a year, we'd be talking about $182,000. And so it's, again, really I haven't seen that there have been historically checks and balances built into the system. Everything is under one person who controls all the information, and that causes me concern. Up until 2011, every single liability for the contractors was indemnified by the district. And I don't know what common practice is, but it causes me some concern that we indemnify everything. We pay for all the insurance and we cover everything that goes wrong. Also, until a couple of years ago, there had been no annual reviews of contractors or attorneys. And there was a number of projects that have been assigned to the Wallace Group without going out to bid, and that causes me concern also. Some of them, I know the grand jury reported as high as $336,000 and at the time, and possibly higher now. So one other, there's high staff turnover. I think we've had, at least 4 go in the last 3 years, and when you've only got 9, that's a really high percentage of staff turnover. This year we've had a lot of incidences of being over our baseline coliforms, and we received a notice of a violation. And I already mentioned the legal fees, mentioned our losses, mentioned our reserves loss, mentioned ongoing expenses exceeding revenues. We have a $1.1 million fine that we're working on. We've had, back in December, we had another lawsuit. I think we've had 6, maybe 7, maybe 5. There are a lot anyway. And it's really difficult to track projects through the budgets, to know where you are on that. There's some reasons for that. Part of it is that you don't ever see anything side by side, so it's hard to track. And also at the year end, we get estimated figures and they're not corrected until later the next year, so you don't really know how you've done compared to your budget, what your actual performance is. One of the other things pointed out is that there are dollar amounts scattered throughout the budget and for work done by the district administrator and the district engineer. And I still don't think that's clear. I still don't regularly get, although the administrator's contract calls for us to regularly see what those expenses are and to break them down. The whole board does not get those at this stage. Mentioned the relationship with regulars is less than stellar. And then the other thing that when you see 200 or so pages of grand jury reports, auditor reports, peer reviews, water board reviews, lawsuits, and all of them with similar concerns in 3 years, that's an awful lot of reports with concerns. One of the other difficulties for the board is that with 3 of us, we can never talk to one another about anything of any seriousness because it's a Brown Act violation. We can only do it here. And it's good for us to do it here, and I don't object to that. But there are times where it would be helpful to have the counsel of another board member, and I see that as being one of the problems as well. So finally, there's no not to exceed clause. There are no not to exceed clauses in, as far as I can tell, in most contracts. And that's all I've got. Those are the things that jumped out at me. So the next 2 pages really are more a written summary. So the first paragraph we've covered. The about 3 paragraphs down, there's a quote from the county grand jury, and you may all have seen this before, but it explains what a conflict of interest is, and it says a conflict of interest exists when an individual is in a position to exploit a professional capacity for his or her personal or corporate benefit. Someone with a conflict of interest may deny that a conflict exists if he or she does not act improperly. However, the conflict still exists because the conflict of roles exists. And I think that's why we're seeing the public perception that there is a conflict of interest. I know that the chair, the council, the district administrator, and I think former chair all deny that there's a conflict of interest. In my opinion, there is a conflict of interest. I don't know how you would call it anything else. And I know there's been some work to mitigate that. I still feel there's a contract. The grand jury said, and here's why. The grand jury said, the board is dependent on the district administrator for the information it reviews in order to fulfill its oversight role and make policy decisions. He gathers and provides the critical budget and cost information to the board. The board, however, has limited knowledge or ability to independently verify or evaluate information from this single source. This situation is a matter of concern because independent information is particularly important when the primary source of information has a conflict of interest. The district administrator manages, controls, or assigns virtually every service performed for the district and is the primary source of information for the board about these activities. This dependency is increased by the fact that the Wallace Group performs so much of the district's work. The district administrator, who is the majority owner of the Wallace Group, then evaluates this work. In addition, when outside consultants are used, the district administrator guides the board in determining who is hired. So we've got a little tiny board and we've got one guy who controls everything. And I think that's not a good position to be in. And basically, I feel that it's the responsibility of a managing executive to make sure that checks and balances are in place, to make sure that that we're minimizing costs, we're maximizing benefits, and we're getting competing bids, annual reviews. And the reason that's important is it protects him, and it protects the board, it protects the staff, it protects the public. It's really critical that those things happen. Whether there's anything wrong or anything going on or not, those things need to happen. And they haven't happened, as far as I can see, on a clerical level or on an administrative level, and they haven't happened on an engineering level. And that gives me great cause for concern. So because of the things that I've seen here, and the grand jury said the district administrators have 25 years to put these controls in place and has not done so. So the jury, the peer review, and the auditor all suggested and I know a number of their suggestions have been put in place, but we have not yet, as far as I'm aware, considered hiring a temporary district administrator to review operations and organization, and independent management, which, and this is their words, which independent of the influence or involvement of the district administrator or the Wallace Group would evaluate and compare operational alternatives for the district, including a review of all services provided to operate the district below the level of board to determine if expenditures can be reduced or revenues can be increased. So those things would help us look at our efficiencies. Obviously, someone needs to be addressing the issue that we're shelling out a lot more than we're pulling in. An independent administrator could become familiar with district operations and finances and then develop and recommend to the board an organizational structure and plan to transition to the new organization. The district should evaluate the benefit of having a full-time administrator and engineer on site versus a part-time contract administrator and/or engineer or contracting engineering, or they should consider contracting out for these services. I have actually spent some time trying to find out if those people are out there. Those people are out there, and I'd be happy to bring some recommendations to the board as to who they might be. And I think that, I mentioned already, I think we need another 2 board members. Just one more item, I think, to sum up. I want to acknowledge that we have a lot of challenges in front of us, and I know that the board is anxious. I'm brand new on the board, and I know that the old board is very anxious that we get ahead of those challenges and take care of them. I think, however, though, part of the process of taking care of those challenges would be for us to start addressing some of the ongoing challenges as far as finances are concerned. And so, well, not just finances, but also operating practices. So I'm suggesting that if we want to dig ourselves out of the hole, it's not just a case of dealing with what we're dealing with already, but we maybe need to look at following through on some of the other suggestions from the people who reviewed the district. Thank you for your time.
Any comments?
I did note, looking at Mayor Peterson's spreadsheet, item number 9, salary and wages in 2006 were 557, and actually went down in 2011.
Yeah, the good things I didn't highlight.
No, well, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I think what we saw was people leaving. We saw probably hours being constrained, so there were fewer employees on the books, and we've had a discussion where we're running on a skeleton crew, and it's been brought up in other meetings that we need to increase staffing for public safety issues to make sure that we've got more people with wastewater treatment licenses at the plant. Should somebody get sick, get injured, take another job. There are other wastewater treatment plants in this area that are currently recruiting, and so that's a concern. We want to make sure that we're being paid a fair wage. And so our percentage of the revenues was actually went from 34%, it's like in 2007, all the way down to 17% for salaries and wages. And so that did jump out at me. As far as the retirement, I don't know. I haven't seen these numbers before. My take on this when we agendized it was a matter of efficiencies. Is the district using best management practices to run in an efficient manner that benefits the ratepayers of the district? And that's what I understand. That's kind of my thinking on taking this. Those are my thoughts. I hadn't seen this obviously before. So the nods that be attached to it. Those are my thoughts here, and what you say at this point.
Okay.
I'll listen to public comment.
Well, first of all, let me go back to, I think, I'm trying to remember, I think it was the second meeting, the last meeting that Bill was here, or maybe it was second to the last meeting that Bill was here. And it had to do with, I think, your desire to take another look at the way district was structured. Pretty much
It was
similar
right
to where we are now.
We talked about it before.
Right. And I think my position at the time was I would not oppose taking a look at options and getting some additional information and costing out those options. In other words, if there was if we decided we wanted a district engineer, if we decided we wanted a combination of a district administrator / plant superintendent. And I think the peer review that you mentioned indicated that people who do that are available out there. In fact, there was, I think, one of the districts that participated in the peer review had that same setup. So, so that was my position then. My position is the same now in terms of taking a good, hard look at costing out our options, and not simply from the standpoint of budget expenditures, but cost efficiency, best practices, all those kinds of things. And the only thing that I would ask is that we make sure that we infuse that process with the realities and the expense associated with those realities of running this plant, which is, what, almost 40 years old. So, and so I think we owe it to ourselves, and I think we owe it to the public to do that. I have no issue there. And I think through that process, it will be educational, perhaps for some of us, and certainly for the public. So I don't have an issue with that. I do want to comment that some of the comments that you made in your report, even today, we're sort of restricted in completely fleshing out the background on that. When you mention something like the lawsuits, those stemmed from employee actions, those stem from personnel actions that we took in closed session. A lot of that still has to remain in closed session. And so unfortunately, the background and the reason and the rationale and all of the specifics that led up to those personnel actions, we cannot, by law, reveal. If we could, I think you may take another look at the validity of the lawsuits. But unfortunately, we can't. The issue with regard to the grand jury is another situation where we are sort of hamstrung. Because, I don't know if you did, Matt, but I testified twice in front of the grand jury on this issue. And
I can neither confirm or deny.
well, that's just it. You can't confirm it or deny it because you have to sign this thing when you go in. For those of you who testified to the grand jury, under penalty of death, I mean, you can't reveal what you said to the grand jury. And but I think what I can do is kind of characterize that the report that they put out, because I went in twice to the grand jury that and the foreperson that wrote that initial report. There was not a consistent opinion on that grand jury about the validity of the report that they issued. That's number one. The second grand jury, which was the year after that, kind of did a check-in. It was a cleanup that they do. They wanted us to come in and talk about what we had done relative to the report that was issued the year before, but there were new players with the exception, I think, of 2 grand jurors. And those 2 grand jurors indicated that some of the assumptions that they were under the first time around were not universally accepted. There was a lot of disagreement about some of the restrictions that they were under in terms of how they became educated. Enough so to write some of the conclusions that they did. So I can't go into any more detail other than that, but particularly with regard to the conflict of interest and things like general services contracts and how those things are manifested and utilized in other districts. All of those things were still up for discussion by those two grand juries. So, and I think that if we go through this process of unwrapping the components of leadership and organization within the district and taking a good hard look at that, I'm hoping that general services contracts will be one of those things that we unwrap. And I think, Debbie, this is, and this was for all of us. I know when I first came on the board, so this isn't precursor or criticism. We all went through a learning curve, and it took me a while to get to grasp an understanding of the budget process that we use, but I found that it was not unlike budget processes that are used elsewhere in special districts. So, throughout your process, you made a statement that you were uncertain about or you couldn't find an answer to. It doesn't mean that that answer doesn't exist somewhere.
It should be easy.
So,
it should be easy. It should be given to us on a platter.
Okay, so that we can work on, obviously, but it doesn't mean that the answer doesn't exist somewhere. Then I had a couple of questions with regard to the county auditor's report and whether, did you have a chance to go through that with some members of the staff?
No, not with the staff.
Okay. And did you look at our last audit report that was done by Moss Levy?
Yes.
Okay. Were there questions there?
Anything that was there, I would have itemized here. I can't recall specifically which of these came from there. There might still be a few things, but this was the gist of it. These are the things that jump out at me from having looked at everything. So I pulled from all the reports. This isn't one report. I pulled from all of them.
Okay.
But yes, I did look at that one.
Okay. And we intentionally went to a different auditor.
Right.
Because I don't think any of us were real comfortable with sticking with the one that we had. And
Well, we had it for a number of years, and it's just
Exactly.
practice to change, so you get a different sets of eyes.
and and we did that. We took that action before. Just kind of another example. We took that action before the grand jury even mentioned it. That was information they pulled from one of our meetings and threw in their report as if it was their idea. It wasn't. It was our idea. We had already taken action to switch auditors. And and we went with Moss Levy, who I think does your books, and they do ours.
I don't think so, actually.
I thought you guys used Moss Levy, but anyhow, we use them in AG, and they're very reputable.
Yeah, I specifically checked to see if they were the same as ours, and they weren't. The only thing that I recall from that report that jumped out that I hadn't seen anywhere else was that we have to put losing money year on year. And most of the other stuff was what's been reported before.
Okay.
I have a couple comments.
And I think we need to let the public speak at some point.
Yeah, we're going to do it public. But in fact, if questions or comments before we go to the public.
A couple of comments. One was regarding the billing. The chair has been going through the Wall Street billings prior to this, and you made a comment last week that you didn't realize everything that was in there, which means that Mayor Peterson and I didn't realize everything that was in there. And
Did you guys get copies of that?
No.
Okay. That's one change that obviously should have taken place, and I think Mike agrees that the more I thought of it, the more, because a lot of what you mentioned, is itemized in there, everybody should see that, right? So it shouldn't be just the chair.
Everybody should see that.
Yeah, it protects
Everybody should know, right, where that's coming from. And, I did a brief, one of the thoughts was, well, try to look at the structure of other plants over the last year. I've done some internet searching. It's been difficult to compare apples to apples because everybody's got, they're run by a city or a different municipality. They have different capacities. They're doing different things with their water, they're recycling, their ground recharging, there's outfalls. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. I looked at plant administrators' compensations. They were anywhere from the low hundreds to a little over 200. For I think it was Orange County was a little over $200,000. They had a huge, very, very large, multiple plants. Tried to look at engineering costs that people were spending for engineering. Very difficult to find. Some sources said $100,000 a year. So I'm trying to compare that to ours with what we're spending, $750 to $850 a year, and try to figure out if that's efficiencies, if that's the value for the district. And it's difficult. It's a difficult analysis.
Yeah, it is a difficult analysis, and it's a tough thing to grasp when you talk about a general services contract.
If I could jump in, that's the reason why I think it's really critical that we have someone in who has been doing this for years and really gets it. I think we need that piece of someone who really understands the engineering at a wastewater plant, because none of the three of us are ever going to really understand that. The other thing is, I think we need someone who really gets the really intensive accounting side of it too. We've had audits, but audits are very superficial. If we're looking for efficiencies, we need people who can marry up the numbers with what's happening in the plant, and that's really specialized.
Because our focus is policy. Other people bring it to
Right, yeah.
us and say, this is what's working, and this is why it's what we think you ought to do, this is why.
We might know what you need, but we can't necessarily do it,
Right.
nor are we expected to.
And so the question is going to be, could we do it for $250 or $450 or $550 or $650, or is $750 really a good value for the ratepayer? And that's where it comes in.
Well, the larger issue is, yes, cost benefit, but the larger issue is ensuring the safe operation of the plant. And that is one of the reasons why we have always used a general services contract with a diverse engineering firm, because when things break out there, they need to be fixed, and they may need a quick assessment by a civil engineer, a mechanical engineer, an environmental engineer, or whatever the case may be. We don't have time to go out to bid. So you put in a general services contract where a firm is capable of delivering all of those services under a fixed budget. The same thing with administrative assistants. And I think I used the example the last time when we had our meeting with the water board. I actually, Heather Billing is very respected by Regional Water Quality Control Board, because she knows what is a permit violation and what isn't. And I wanted her at that meeting. Had she not been available, we'd have gone in there with half of our guns loaded. So,
That's part of my problem.
so
We need to not go in there with the guns. I think we need a different approach.
well, maybe it was a poor
It was
analogy.
very accurate.
No, I don't think so, because you had to have been there, number one. You don't go in there without a defense, because what we encountered were essentially AR-15s, if you want to continue on with that analogy. And so we can either be targets, or we can state our case and stand up for ourselves. And she helped us do that. That's the point I'm trying to make. The other example that happened just recently was the cogen issue. And obviously, we've been having difficulty with that, and we've got a lawsuit against the company. And you all read that report that went to Cumberland, and that came from someone on John's staff, and that came from the mechanical engineer who wrote that technical paper. That is something that he needed right away for his filing. We would have had to have gone out to bid for that. So those are the kinds of things that, as we move forward and we look at all of those options, we just have to be mindful that those things happen on a routine basis, unfortunately, and when they come up, there's usually a narrow time frame that you need to respond to, and if we don't have the talent available, that means we have to contract for it.
And that's why I think it's really critical that we have an expert in there analyzing it. Because you put me in there to analyze it, I'm not going to give you the right answers. We need an expert in there to analyze it. This is a business person, it's not an engineer.
Okay, any other, before we go to the public?
I said you couldn't.
Okay, all right. Members of the public would like to come forward and comment on this item?
I'm bringing this without my glasses, so we'll do really good. Thank you very much, all of you. I don't come to meetings very often, and it's really interesting to watch the process. Thank you for your service. I really admire you all.
Can we get a name?
Oh, it's Patricia Price.
Okay.
I'm from Aurora, Brandon, you're one there. Voted for you, Tony. The reason I'm here tonight is because I'm really curious. I've been reading in the paper for the last couple of years things that just didn't sound right to me. It just is like, this sounds like a conflict of interest. And I didn't have a lot of information, just what I was reading. So I thought I would come tonight and hear the different, opinions and sides and what everybody had to say. And I really feel like I learned a lot of things I hadn't heard before. And I firmly think there is a conflict of interest. And I don't think anybody's doing anything awful. I mean, I wouldn't point fingers or anything. I'm just saying that I'm a member of the public, and it doesn't look good to me. So public opinion, other people might think the way that I do. The recommendations that were made by Debbie Peterson sound very valid and like they would work. It just really sounds like we need to make some changes and do what it takes to clean up anything that needs to be cleaned up, to clarify anything that needs to be cleared up. And you say about the experts, we have more than one group of experts. If we open this up and look around for people who are experts, you can have 2 or 3 experts to call on any given field. So that to me is not a problem. It's nice when you have them in-house, but I think it's time to not have them in-house anymore, like we have been. Just, it doesn't make sense to me. When I look at this, I get a feel for it, but I couldn't say, well, there's something right or there's something wrong here. It's just that if she was having so much trouble getting the information, I don't understand why she didn't get the information. Like, isn't it public information that the district has? That I could go in and get it. It seems like she could have got in and got it too. And it doesn't sound like it was easy at all for her to get the information. That to me right there, that's a red flag going. I was like, I don't know why the facts and figures couldn't have been made available right away if that's what she wanted. So I think it's a good thing that there's new blood coming in and things are hopefully going to get shook up a little bit and opened up. Because if there's nothing, there's no wrongdoing, it's going to be fine. If there is, it just needs to be pulled out and straightened up and cleaned up. So I would urge you to go on and make changes and just clear this up. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at the public. Like I say, I was curious from what I had read. I know that other people read that stuff. I was curious enough to come and listen. And I would really like this to be addressed and things to be changed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
My name is Brad Snook. I'm the chair of our NH chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. I have a document that I'd like to enter into the record. If you look at the board packets over time, you'll notice that a lot of the public comments that are made are brief summaries. People will stand up here for 3 minutes and talk, and their summaries are 2 or 3 sentences, and oftentimes I feel a little shortchanged, if you will, on what I said and what is actually stated in the record. So part of bringing this document was to kind of remedy that situation a little bit more. And if you've heard me speak to either your councils or here at the Sanitation District over the last couple of years, you've heard Surfrider's request for an independent investigation of potential malfeasances by the Wallace Group here at the Sanitation District. And I think what I'm hearing here tonight is a lot of this information should have come out 2 years ago. If the board would have been in a different mindset to open up to some of the public scrutiny that was going on there. And who knows what this district would be like today if we had started 2 years ago instead of starting now. We don't know. All we know is this was a step that had to be taken, and we're taking it now instead of 2 years ago. So, we still feel that the best remedy for this district is to go ahead and do this investigation. Check it out, do the financials, take water quality into account. There were some operational issues that were documented by the water board and others. Investigate those. Bring those out to public scrutiny. Tell them that we're looking at it. Here's what we're doing. Be proactive on these issues. 2 years ago, it would have been great. We don't want to be here in 2 years saying the same thing over again. There was a Star Trek episode, I'm nerdy here, where the ship was like going into a wormhole and keeps blowing up. And they're following the same procedures over and over and over again. And it keeps blowing up until somebody has some sort of deja vu and says, we got to do something different. They have to go around and tell everybody, we need to do this a little bit different. And they end up saving the ship. And it's all based on kind of, they don't know exactly where they're going, but they know they got to do it different. That's what we're saying. So I think it's worth looking at, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mark London, I'm running Randy. Thank you for your service. This has been a breath of fresh air for me, and I really wish that you would consider a restructure and an evaluation. I don't want to reiterate what everybody else has said, but once again, thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Mary McNally. I live in Ramada. I also own several rental properties in Grove Beach. and I probably reiterate what the others have said. And I also have some concern that this hasn't been an issue for the board before because it has gone on for so long. I'm a member of a very small board, and I take personal liability on, I believe, if I let something go on that could speak of cronyism or impropriety. I believe 25 years ago, there might have been one person in the county who had what might have been the only one with that kind of expertise. I don't believe that's the case anymore. I absolutely believe there's a conflict of interest. I'd love to have a job where I can assign myself my own contracts. It's just inappropriate. And I believe a change, an audit, I don't really have an opinion on. I heard what you said, that you believe we should have a comprehensive engineering firm, which I believe is absolutely true. I believe that should be different than the administrator who assigns the contracts. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Tom Giesling, General Manager of Oceana Community Service District. When I first came here as a consultant, a lot of the same things that are on these pages jumped off at me too. And I used to come to these meetings and make questions and suggestions, and I was told by district council that, hey, it's nice to speak, and you really should go through your board member. So my board member would come and speak, and she would get rolled over by the past chairman when she would try to speak. I hate it when somebody comes to the microphone in my meetings and they speak to non-facts. But the reality of it is if you go to the bottom line of 41, these are factual numbers that the Wallace Group has taken out of this district over the last 5 years. I have a very similar spreadsheet in my own office that I track, and I track it right off the warrants. And I track it, the budget items and everything else, because I have to report to my board what's going on with the sanitation district. If your city manager, or I, or Mr. Peralta in Grover Beach has something that comes up, we just get paid our salary. We're not allowed to go out and do time and material. We're not allowed, if there's a project like on Grand or I'm redoing the water yard, I'm not allowed to add 25% to my fees as a contract manager. To me, that's wrong. That's taken away from the deal. I'm not faulting Mr. Wallace. That was the business practice. This is when things were good, but when things are bad, and the economic hardship that we've all gone through for the last 3 years, somebody should have put the brakes on and said, wait a minute, we need to re-examine this, go through a paradigm shift of how we're analyzing this. And the reason why I say it's fact is when we were going before the NOV, Mr. Wallace's representative put a thing up on the board. The state said, oh, you have reserves of $5 million, and they were 2 years old. Now we have reserves of $3 million. But we've been losing money every single year. And if we're losing money, that falls on my entity, it falls on yours, Mr. Mayor, and it falls on you, Madam Mayor, and we are accountable to the people. And I do believe the changes made, just like we made changes in Oceana, and just like we made changes with the personnel for the staff. I just have a very tough time when I look at the overall budget and revenue that was brought in over the time period, and it's all going out to one group. Now, I agree that they provide good services in a lot of areas, but I've sat through a lot of these meetings and heard about, oh, we did this on a major budget item, and then a month later there's something wrong with that major budget item. Or somebody questions, well, how do we track it through? And they don't get a straight answer. I get cambered all the time, and we put everything out there. If somebody wants to see it, it's there. And I really think that you need an independent person to come in and look. If anything, like the lady said a couple before me, if there's nothing there, it's going to show. We shouldn't be afraid of it. And then the last thing I want to make is, you made a comment about the audits. We're required as municipalities and districts to alternate the auditors every 3 years, so there is no conflict. And so that's why you guys went to Moss Levy. We had Moss Levy for 3 years, now we switched to Caliber. when they're done. So it's just a standard requirement. It's a check and balance. But an audit only looks at financial feasibility and reports any internal controls that are affecting the financial side. They're not going to know anything about a clarifier. They're not going to know anything about a cogen deal. I hear rumors all the time about that whole cogen deal. Are they fact? I don't know. I haven't been able to go through the stuff. But bring somebody in. If this was being dragged before each one of your cities or your district, I guarantee that the people would be out and they'd say, go take a look at it. Is he right? Is he right or is he wrong? I don't know, but let somebody prove it. Because it's tough for him to sit there and have somebody come and hammer him and hammer him and hammer him. And he's almost in a defensive position, so unless you do this, this exonerates. But the facts speak for themselves. You have assets of 20 million. Now those assets, or it's actually the number I have is closer to 17. The reserves have dropped. If this was a company that you were investing your money in, I guarantee you'd be pulling your stock, you'd be selling your stock as soon as you have it. So again, in fairness to Mr. Wallace, you should consider doing this, because otherwise the relentless attacks are going to come forward. Let the facts speak for themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mary Luciano. First of all, Dr. Peterson, I want to thank you so very much for completing this and putting this together. It took an unsurmountable amount of time, and you've only been on this board since December, and this amount of work is really very impressive. It's much better than my string map at home. I think what, and I also agree with all your recommendations on how to move forward. What I think the holdup is that, and please don't take this personal, Mr. Farrar, but when I first was elected on the board, I too was appointed to the Sand District, and it was extremely uncomfortable, and I don't know how many times you yourself or Mr. Nichols actually told me basically shut up and just sit there. And so it wasn't an inviting atmosphere, and I asked him to change to a different committee. It wasn't so hostile. And the hostility is still there. When I heard you speaking, I thought, is he missing the point? Is he going to continually defend each and every act in just this summary alone? If we can add, that's the bottom line, is the money. And to have to try to defend every single movement from this little tiny district that has such a huge, tremendous impact on all of us down here is too much. And so I see you as an obstructionist. I see you as an obstructionist who some of us were so thankful that Grover Beach had changed leadership on this level, right? That we were going to be able to get in there and try to turn the elephant around so it doesn't continue to put us in harm's way, constantly getting penalized, constantly being in the media. I mean, how many entities can say there's a conflict of interest before you believe that there is a conflict of interest? And so that's why I say you're an obstructionist. You will pick at every single thing that is looked at, whether it's an auditor or whatever. The bottom line is this: 1 + 1 = 2. That's the bottom line, is the dollar. That never changes. So no matter what entity or venue you're in defending the sanitation district, because there's so many of them, right? We're still losing money. So when I came on this board, I said, my understanding was the sanitation district was an investment of the people of Oceana, was an investment for the people of Arroyo Grande. And 33.3%, I want to see a return. I want to see a return. Our bond is up on this plant. Where is the return? And then it came out that, the island situation came out, and your board had not carried O&M insurance. And that was the bottom line for me. Sitting on a nonprofit board, that is just unspeakable, unreprehensible. to have board members sitting there thinking that they were covered by insurance and they weren't. So you can't justify it anymore. I think in the best interest of your own personal political future, maybe it's time that maybe your alternate, maybe a little fresh blood, who can assist in moving it forward. But right now, I think that we all have a chance of turning things around. That either you're going to become part of, but it is going to come, it's going to turn, and you can't keep making excuses. So I go back to your board, going to 5 people. Please keep that in mind. We had mentioned a finance person who is in financing, and what was the other recommendations? Engineering. Great, brilliant idea. I was thinking of environmentalists who are held accountable, and everybody goes, but they're not elected. Yes, well, there's ways to work bylaws, policies, and procedures, to have appointments, to have constituencies. We do it with LAFCO, we do it with other committees, so there's ways to work around that. Thank you very much, and let's make a change.
All right, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Jeff, I think you're the only one that hasn't gotten up.
Mr. Rice.
As the alternate, I'm just going to, I would say as the alternate for River Beach, I'm going to be supportive of what my mayor has to do, and I'm interested in listening to what the board direction is, and we'll move forward from there, depending on how that proceeds.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, we're going to close public comment on this item, and I intentionally waited for us to make our initial observations and comments and the public before I went to Mike and John on this. But I would like to, now that you've heard everything, to indicate where your position is on this. John?
Sure. Just a couple of comments having to do with Director Peterson's access to documents. If I remember correctly, you had requested 5 years of budgets when we first came on board, and we provided those within a couple days. And I don't know if there was some miscommunication about your access to documents. If there was, I apologize. But we provided, I believe, all the documents that you requested. And as you know, the audits are on file at the district office as well as my office. So if there was some confusion or mix-up on that, I apologize, but I thought that we provided all the documents that you wanted to have. And again, they are public documents, and any board members of the public have access to those. The yearly budgets are on file with each of your districts, and we provide those to your city manager, district manager every year. So with respect to that, I just wanted to clear up my understanding that we had done everything that was requested of us. Looking at the spreadsheet, one thing jumps out at me, and that's the roll-up of the operating expenses and the operating revenues and so forth. And one thing that's obvious is that we've included depreciation in there. Depreciation is a non-cash type of expense, and when you subtract out the depreciation, which a number of agencies do, to see that there was a positive operating gain in those years, I believe. And from a depreciation standpoint, what you try to do is to make that up through connection fees at a later time. And since 2005, when we had probably over $500,000 in connection fees, you see in the most recent years when we've had a real crash in the building industry, that those connection fees have really gone down. But I don't feel like I should comment on some of the statements in the attachment. I think we could talk about each of these and probably agree on some of the corrections that might be made or disagree. But again, I would welcome the fact that there be some some look at these things and the structure of the district, and we can compare to other folks and do an economic analysis on whether it is more advisable to have a permanent employee as a district administrator or district engineer, whatever. I just want us to make some decisions on this and to move on. It's not fair to the board, it's not fair to me to continue with the types of comments that we've been doing in this regard. So, in going back to some of the earlier comments about the grand jury and so forth, a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of years have been unusual, and there have been a lot of smooth sailing for a number of years before that. But as everybody knows, we had some personnel issues. Those personnel issues mushroomed into other issues and other constraints upon the district in terms of legal fees, as well as just burning up the time to handle those kinds of things. And we were not looking to benefit from having to service those kinds of problems. I'd much rather deal with the projects at the plant or the operations of the plant and supporting Bob and his guys than dealing with those kinds of things. But you have to make a choice. Either you don't deal with them and let them take their own course, which might be easier in some ways, or you deal with them. You stand up to them and deal with them, and that's what we did. So I think that unfortunately that has taken a life of its own in a number of ways through the blogs that are out there that are very ascetic and unfair in their comments. But at the same time, it's a fact that they are there. And I would welcome some clarification on those things. So that's basically what I can say.
One of the things that comes down to is transparency. And John, I also asked for the audits, I think, after the water board hearing, and you emailed me back and said those had already been approved by another board and you might give those to me.
I don't recall that, Matt. That's not our normal procedure, and again, those audits are on the bookshelf at the district office, on my bookshelf as well, and on the bookshelf of your district offices as well, because we provide those every year as part of the agenda packages. So I don't understand why it was difficult to provide those, but again, if there's a misunderstanding, I apologize.
One of the things that I think the December 2010 spill has raised to our forefront is public safety, and that's of course paramount to any economic concerns.
Right.
But there is this economic concern, and Mike has said it one time, Mike Seitz had said, you know, with anything mechanical, there's a possibility of failure.
It will fail, so.
Yeah, and that's a reality. And it's not just reality for South Slow City, it's a reality for every water, everything that's got something mechanical to it can fail. And even a brand new Cadillac can break down on the first day. But it exposed a weakness or vulnerability in our district as far as what it costs to do business. Tom Giesland brought it up when he said, you know, if it happened for one of the city managers of AG or River Beach, or Tom Giesland is the OCSD manager, they just put in more hours and it's covered in their salary. You know, here, you know, it costs us more money, and we ended up spending, you know, lots of money, and that's going to be on, you know, February 20th agenda item, what the spill actually cost us, because we get wrapped up in operations instead of litigation. And you know, that's a concern that this could happen again. We've been having some high BODs, and so, you know, it may cost a lot of money to get answers and to figure out if this is the most efficient way, if there's another way. You know, are we ripping off the Band-Aid quickly, or are we ripping it off slowly? And you know, maybe my thought out loud, I'm not saying it's a suggestion, is that another peer review for management structure to determine whether or not this is efficient might be a good way to handle that. And basically, it's saying, you know, bring in a consultant and have an overview. Is that?
Yeah, I
Follow your train of thought.
Before we go any farther in this, I want to check in with Mike. And, Mike, do you have any comments with regard to this?
Well, in terms of the overall department, well, first let me just comment regarding the legal fees, because that was brought up specifically. And it shows in 2007, the total fees paid over that year were 35,222, and it gets to the culmination in 2011 of $251,865. What I can tell you is when we started in 2008, the latter part, December of 2008, and then beginning of 2009, were when multiple issues arose regarding personnel at the district. And what you see going forward are those personnel actions resulting in higher legal fees. Then added on to that in 2011, originally the NOV in response to that, and the latter part of that year was still responding in regards to the NOV, and the ACL was actually issued in 2012. And when you take a look at those fees, starting in 2009, is when an investigator was retained and was under my budget. And that investigator was primarily responsible for the personnel actions that were ongoing, and specifically that investigator was originally hired as a result of an allegation by an employee regarding a conflict of interest and mismanagement of a project by Wallace Group, and at the direction of the board chair, that investigator was originally retained to investigate that. He was subsequently used to investigate other personnel items. Starting in 2010, that budget wasn't just me. In fact, I'm not sure how much of that was me, but other lawyers were hired for various aspects of it, including coverage counsel. And I'm not charging anywhere near the rates that our consulting attorneys are charging in regards to these things. And that is basically the explanation for that large number in 2011. I think at that point, at one point, we had either 4 or 5 different attorneys hired representing various aspects reporting to the board. I can't talk to you about what I tell you in closed session because I have to stay in closed session, but I'm not comfortable with the way that the attorney's fees have risen over the years. I acknowledge that, but the point is that over the last 5-6 years, there have been new and increasing legal challenges that have required the legal involvement. But trust me, I know that every time we go to a board meeting, it just takes 2 votes. I'm no longer your lawyer, so I try to be responsive. I've not had anyone come to me with a question regarding either my bill or the bill of others, so I'm not sure how to respond other than to say that I'm always there to answer your questions in regards to what's being charged, and you always have an opportunity to do my bills as a part of the warrants.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I didn't make that a feature by way of criticizing your fees. I don't deny that you did that work. I don't have a concern with that. It's more that when you see that level of attorney fees, you know something's wrong. So it's not so much that I have, that's not where I was going with that. Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, is that it?
I think John's right, though, when he says it's not fair to keep taking this criticism. We need to address it, handle it, put it to bed. So this criticism, it's like a sticker in your sock that just never comes out, and it just keeps festering, and keeps festering.
Yeah.
We need to address it.
I wanted to respond also to Mr. Wallace. It was very difficult for me to get the paperwork. I called you for it, and you said it would be very difficult. You suggested I go online, There is nothing online that has anything with finances in it. It's not in any of the packets or with any of the agenda information. And I double checked it. Our city doesn't have it. Former chair had thrown away everything but this year. So it wasn't, I did ask for it, it was very difficult. And I finally got tired of asking and did go to the county auditor on November 12th. On November 14th, I knew I still needed the budgets. And that was the response I got, you know, oh, go ask the city, go online, oh, it would be really difficult. And then when I finally said I really needed them, because I couldn't sit on the board without looking at the budgets, Bill Nichols gave me a big lecture, because it was going to be really expensive. And either you or Bill suggested maybe I should pay the $60. And that's when I got mad, and that's when I got the budgets. But it was not easy. It was extremely frustrating and not at all straightforward.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I think we have different memories on that, but
I have
maybe
notes.
okay.
Okay. I just want to make a few quick comments, and then we'll get to where we're going to go with this. And the first thing I want to talk about is the legal fees. And member of the public came up and made a comment with regard to my posture in this and my history with this. And I want to, and all of that was sort of categorized as being an obstruction. And I want to clarify that. One of the benefits, if you want to call it a benefit, of being on this board for quite a number of years is the fact that I have seen various different dimensions of the operation associated with this. And historically, our legal fees have been pretty low. For a number of years, things ran pretty smoothly. As Mike indicated, I think a lot of things sprung forward from the personnel actions that we took. We had a couple of employees that if we had it to do over again, knowing what we know, we would have taken the same action. Private industry is vastly different than a public agency. When you take a personnel action that results in termination, that process can go on for years, and the people who are the parties of that can, in fact, and do, and have in this case, push back with their own litigation, and that's essentially what happened here. Through that process, information was provided to the grand jury that triggered their investigation. And then, as we were finding our way through that, just looking at the timeline of things, the December 2010 storm thing hit. And so then the water board entered the picture. I think the assumption here, and it's an easy assumption to make, particularly if you look at the Tribune or Cal Coast News or any of the other media sources out there. If you look at that, if you look at the reports that are published, if you don't know any different, if you only know what you read in those sources, you take them as being 100% accurate. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of what was in the grand jury report, a lot is what was in the water board's notice of violation for December 2010, the NOV that resulted from that storm incident. Most of what you read in what I call the San Luis Obispo's version of the National Enquirer, which is Cal Coast News, simply is not accurate. So to make the assumption, to move forward on the assumptions that every piece of documentation that has been written about this district is 100% accurate is not the case. And if that, and having that opinion, if having that opinion classifies me personally as an obstructionist, then I'll wear that label. Sorry, but I'm going to hang around here for, at least for the immediate future. That said, this has gone on for so long, for all of the reasons that everyone has indicated. It needs to be resolved. So, I am not opposed, as I indicated before, to unwrapping this thing and doing an objective job of analyzing our alternatives for where we want to go now and into the future. I guess the question now is, how do we do this? Do we find someone out there who we bring in who can, in fact, look at several different scenarios, cost them out, make recommendations? Debbie, you brought this to us. Do you have any ideas on how we proceed?
I think if we're going to find efficiencies, I think we need to get someone who can really dig into it. And so I do have an accountant from out of the county, so there would be no question of any kind of relationship that would cause problems. So I have someone in mind there, and then also am aware of someone who's local but retired who works with folks out of Santa Maria who has a lot of experience in this field. So having interviewed several people and talked with several people, I think they're probably about the two best options available, but obviously that's a board decision. I can bring them to you and you all can decide.
I don't know these people. Are they willing to write an RFP for us?
Yeah, sure. Sure. They might be looking for
now you talk about the accounting issue, which is different.
Right. They might be looking for something from us, but yes, I've had conversations and both have understood that we're not flush, and that the accountant said he could do it in increments of $5,000, and he would work with us on that. The other gentleman is, I don't know what his team costs, the plant people, but the gentleman who pulled that together is retired and can't work too many hours anyway, or he'll mess up his retirement. So,
let me check in with you on this, Mike. And what I'm thinking is that what we probably need to do is put out an RFP and to put into that RFP a scope of work. And so that means what we're going to have to do is define what we want this person to do. And we're all going to have to agree on that. And so can I suggest that you get together with Mike and maybe put together a scope of work which might go into an RFP?
can I ask, do we need to do an RFP for professional services?
Generally, for professional services, that's exactly what you do. For any other thing you do, it's known as a bid package. When you're searching for that, you do a request for proposals. And you're not required to use the lowest price when you go through that process. So generally, it is an RFP. What I'm thinking, Director Peterson, I would take direction from you as to what you want in it, and I could prepare a summary for the board to consider at the next meeting.
And then what we can do is take a look at it. If we want to add, modify.
I think Tony's right. Do you mind working with Mayor Peterson so that we...
I think I just said I'd be happier.
Okay, I messed up this time.
My eyes, your ears.
Exactly. So listen and watch. Okay. That deals with the accounting, and then as far, is it a similar issue for the grant?
I think if we have someone who's, really similar to Mr. Wallace, who's been doing this for all his life, can take a look at it, and I think they'll need to work together.
Maybe maybe I'm misunderstanding here. I thought we were going to do an RFP for someone who could come in and do everything.
I have two individuals, I have two individuals, one of them can work with a team. The other one is independent, the accountant is independent.
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we, what I would like to see is a comprehensive scope of work that embodies everything that we want done. And that includes, you know, an analysis of accounting, that includes organizational issues. And then once we look at the body of work, then we can find talent to put with that scope of work.
I think that makes sense. You know, one thing I think the discussion that we had in the public comment is there are two different contracts with Wallace. And really the idea is totally different. The analysis is sever one or both. Because,
To get rid of the conflict? Right.
and that becomes an issue. And again, it's an economic feasibility and it's an issue. So perhaps you and Mr. Sides are working on that.
Okay, do you think we can have something by the next meeting?
Yeah.
A draft of this? All right. Do we need a motion to do that, or is that just staff direction sufficient?
I think that's staff direction.
Okay. Are you satisfied with
Yeah,
that?
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. That's a good discussion.
All right, we're going to move on to item 6, miscellaneous items, oral and written communication.
Just one piece of written communication about the SDRA is asking for, I'm sorry, it's to remind us that we received a credit for our longevity with SDRA of over $1,000. So that just provided for your. Also, there are some free seminars coming up with SDRA that I forwarded to the board, and hope everybody received that if you wish to watch those.
They're webcasts.
They're webinars.
Webinars.
And one was today, so that's going to be a little hard to watch.
I
But
missed that one.
it may be learning back again. So sometimes they have them on a menu where you can pull this back up. The other two are pretty good. That's all I have on the miscellaneous correspondence.
Okay. Any oral or written communication from the board members? All right. Then we are going to go to closed session. Before we do that, any public comment on any of our closed session items that are on the agenda? Okay.
Dispatch board to go into closed session pursuant to government code section 549, 7.6 in regards to